This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, welcome everyone. So in today's segment, we will look into what is a requirements traceability matrix, which is also known as RTM in short. So first of all, is what is it? It's a document. It's a sort of a linking document, you can say, which helps us to do this project management and software development quite effectively. How does it help? Is the list of requirements that you discuss and you conclude with the stakeholders and then you document it, right? Now we have to ensure that each and every requirement of it, without missing even a single one of those, has to be properly developed, tested, executed, and launched, right? So had it been just around, three or five or seven requirements and all, it is still okay. Like, few requirements and fewer details involved in each of these requirements. So even if some changes come through the process, it's not really going to be much of a big deal and we can manage it. But when we talk about a project which is running for months together, then it becomes a little tedious to be able to manage and track each of these requirements. Uh, to give you an example, our own, if we talk about the food delivery app, then if you look at a very high level, you have requirements related to user registration, you have requirements related to login, then for the product list, the food items, the restaurants list, then you have the search functionality, shopping cart, checkout process, payment gateway, then you have some NFRs, like, non-functional requirements like performance, load time requirements, security, mobile responsiveness. So there are way too many requirements. And if you drill down to each and every one which I mentioned, then it'll, lead to few more requirements. I'm sorry for this message. Okay. So how do you ensure that, all of these requirements are being managed effectively all through the process without missing any of these? So that is where your RTM comes into picture. So this is more like a document which ensures that each and every requirement is traceable from its origin, means where it all starts in the workshops which you conduct with stakeholders, right? Right from there through design, development, testing, and implementation. Okay. So what do you do in this? We will look into the points related to the RTM and then I'll also discuss with an example. Okay, that'll make things a little easier. First of all, the list of requirements should be prepared. So you start by documenting all these requirements which you have gathered from all the stakeholders. Okay, so sometimes if it is possible that all of your stakeholders are available at a single point of time, so not a problem. You get all the requirements together. But if that's not the case, maybe some of the stakeholders you're conducting interviews and getting the requirements. With some other people, you have shared a list of questions and got the response. Then few more stakeholders, you have conducted meetings and got the requirements. So like this, when you are getting it in bits and pieces, you need to collate all of those requirements, which can include both functional and non-functional. So let me tell right away that when we speak about non-functional requirements, it is always a good practice to discuss with the testing manager. Your QA team, which is there, right? There'll be a manager of that particular quality assurance testers. So talk to that person and get a better idea of what sort of non-functional requirements can be used. So functional, you need to get from stakeholders. There's no other option. But non-functional, you can rely on testing manager because they would be using a similar set of NFRs for multiple projects. Okay, so okay, you got all these list of requirements, right? So that's the first step. Then what you do is you assign unique identifiers to each and every requirement. Why is it so? Because you need to track it, right? So if you assign an identifier, something like requirement 001, the requirement 002, like that, if you give, what happens is using this identifier, you can link it to the next set of pointers that come up later in the project. Okay, so you assign unique identifiers for each and every feature or each and every business requirement. Then what you do is you link the requirements to the sources. What do I mean by this is Again, if you have all your stakeholders available at a single point of time, workshop scenario wherein you're able to capture the requirements together, then not a problem. But if that's not the case, it becomes difficult for you to track which requirement has come from which stakeholder. As I said, sometimes one stakeholder might have given you over an interview, while some other person would have given it as part of some response to a question. Sometimes you get some requirements based on the document analysis that you do. So you need to document the source of each requirement. Nothing but you have assigned a unique identifier right here. So you say that, okay, for this requirement, requirement 001, this was the source of requirement. That way. Okay, this gives the context and helps in understanding where each requirement has come and why is it necessary. The next thing that you need to do is link it to the design and development process. So using this identifier, focus on the design. Maybe we discussed about user registration. You can maybe club user registration function and login together and say that, okay, for this particular feature, the design of the screen is the one which you can link. You might have prepared a login screen. You say that requirement 001 can be linked or can be mapped to the login screen. Okay, something like that. After that design, the next step is the development. So when it goes to development, again, a piece of code could be written. Now, this is for the developers to make sure that in the comments related to the code, they can add this identifier saying that this particular piece of code is to fulfill the requirement 001. After that has happened, the next step would be to link to the testing. So again, when testing begins, what do the QAs do? They make use of the test cases, right? They make use of the test cases created and create scenarios out of it, and then they use that for the test case execution. Now, each and every test case that has been created, you will be able to link it to the business requirement again. Maybe you can go through uh, the internal mapping that has happened between design development also. You can map your test cases to those so that indirectly it traces its origin to the exact business requirement. And the end purpose of all of this is status tracking. So what happens is every requirement you can track as to has it is there any mapping of it in the design part? Is there any mapping for it in the development? Are there any test cases that can be mapped to this business requirement? So that way you can track the way in which every requirement is getting developed and tested. So this is the purpose of it. Now, how does it really benefit is, first thing, of course, as the name says, it gives you a proper traceability. Second thing is, if there is any change management coming up, like any requirement is changing, then you will be able to track those changes also using these unique identifiers of the requirements. That makes things a lot easier, especially when there are too many requirements. It also helps in your verification validation process. Okay, I would urge you to go back to our initial videos where we discussed about knowledge areas, and I did touch upon the point of what is the difference between verification and validation. Okay, so this traceability will help in that also. And sometimes, there will be some internal client audits or compliance or regulatory related stuff wherein it becomes important for the client to make sure to keep a track of every requirement, how it has been taken for execution. So there it will help. And also it helps in communicating. So you know that you have a unique identifier, you can use that to map every requirement and it helps to communicate about where, which status it is, the level of progress of each and every requirement. It will be easy to track and discuss about it among the team members. Okay, so this is more like the concept part. Now let's look at an example that makes things a little more easy. So here the example is slightly different. We are looking at a online flight booking application. Think of something like a TripAdvisor or a Skyscanner, or if you talk about Indian websites, it could be like Make My Trip or Yatra.com. So what happens is here you're able to uh, book a flight ticket using a software application. Okay. Do not go through the entire document at once. Let's go through in a phase-wise manner. So here, if you see the leftmost part of it, okay, so this one is referring to the business requirement document. And then in middle, you have the functional requirements document, or it is also called as functional specifications document, functional specification requirements. There could be a different name which is used, but the point is you have business requirements, then functional requirements, and then the test case document. So here the mapping is happening between these among these three itself. The design and development part is not there. This is for the sake of simplicity. You can understand that once this is clear, then you will be able to link it to the design and development part also. Okay. So now come back to the business requirement document. So here, if you see, business requirement ID has been given and the use case has been mentioned. So for example, the first unique identifier that you see here is BR underscore one, means business requirement underscore one. What is it related to? It's related to the reservation module. Okay. So you are saying that the first business requirement that we have discussed with the stakeholder is a reservation module. I'm assigning it a unique identifier of BR underscore one. And then what is happening? Then you have the other one, which is the payment module, okay, which is BR underscore two. Now within this reservation module, if you see, when you dig down into the details, then you identify that reservation can happen in multiple ways. You can reserve one-way ticket, only I want to travel from say Chicago to say Florida. Okay, that's one way. Now the other way you can do the reservation is a two-way ticket, a return ticket. So that is also referred to as round way ticket, which could be like you're going from Chicago to Florida and again coming back. So that sort of reservation is also possible. Then there's a multi-city ticket booking. You want to travel from one place to another place, from there to some other city, and so on and so forth. Okay, from Chicago to Florida, from there to Mexico, and from there to somewhere else, and coming back. So that will be your multi-city ticket booking. So all of these, if you see, fall under the reservation module itself, right? So what are you doing here? Functional requirement, you're given the unique identifier of FR underscore 1, FR underscore 2, and 3. Now, all of these three, okay, are supposed to be mapped to the BR underscore 1, okay? So this sort of, there is a splitting which is happening, but you're still able to map it to the original business requirement. Similarly, payment module, you can pay through multiple methods, map all of those to the payment module, which is BR underscore 2. This is what you have done. And then, as I said, there'll be a design part and development part. Let's look fine to the testing part. So for every requirement, there should be a specific test case created usually. And sometimes it will be required that you need to create multiple test cases for a single business requirement or for a single functional requirement. For example, for one-way ticket booking, if this has to be tested properly, what can you do? You can test a happy path, like enter one city name, select a date, and select the number of passengers and see if it is really working or not. The second test case could be a negative scenario, like deliberately you enter a date which has already passed off and see if it is really allowing you to book the ticket or not. It should fail. The other thing is you deliberately book a date for a date which is like 1 year down the line. That should not happen. That should not even be possible to start with. So that can be another test case. So like this, you have a couple of test cases. All of those will be again given identifier, test case 001, 002, 003, so on and so forth. Now all of those are linked to the FR underscore one. Similarly, you have a set of test cases for round way ticket. You map it to that, and so on and so forth. Now, when you do this, what happens is you will be able to clearly identify and track how the testing is also happening for every business requirement. For example, by looking at this table, I can identify that only one test case is there for the payment through debit card. So might be, it is not got tested properly. So the negative scenarios are missing out for this. So just by looking at this document, I can find it out and I can then go to the testing team and I can ask them what is the reason for it. Okay, so that way it really helps. And also, do not think that it is always the responsibility of a BA to create this entire RTM because it depends. You create based on what you have documented. That is the VRD and FRD. Then the design team can map their screens to this one using the document. Development team can add their inputs into it. The testing team can add their inputs to it. And then at the end, you have a comprehensive document which will allow you to track each and every requirement. Having said all of these things, Now, the natural question is like, do we really need to create something like this? The reason behind asking this question is it's a very time consuming and tedious process to create this matrix. It looks very simple, but being able to track everything, map everything is not a simple thing. You need to be on top of it at regular phases of your project. So, first of all, is it really needed? So, the point is, it becomes important when the project is very complex and the client is actually, a little bit very specific about each and everything. Else, what happens is maybe this client and your company have been handling projects, multiple projects. Then a level of trust and confidence would have already got built. In such scenarios, when the next project comes, the RTM and all would not be really required because they think that okay, we can be assured that we get a quality output from them. Similarly, if the business analyst has been able to create that sort of rapport with the stakeholders and ensure them that all the requirements will really be captured and executed properly, then they may not even ask for it. So some of the times there'll be a specific ask from the stakeholders for this to be created. If that is not there, then most of the times you may not be creating it. But nonetheless, it is good to know that there is a process like this which can help in tracking the requirements so that it can use it when required. Okay. So this is about the RTM. We'll close this here and we'll meet with the next segment in the next video. Thanks everyone.